So we gotta talk about Team USA because they might be in real trouble. For those who are unaware, right now in the Olympics, we are playing expedition games leading into the actual tournament, and Team USA just matched up with South Sudan, a game in which many people, like myself, thought that USA would be able to beat them confidently. This is a roster with Team USA with some of the most talented players around the league going up against a roster with South Sudan that has some players who've been in the NBA, but for the most part, no NBA caliber players really are on this roster. Also be very mindful, in the last expedition game, Team USA matched up with Team Serbia and they beat them pretty convincingly. So while on a roll with some momentum going up against a roster that is severely lacking in talent in contrast to Team USA, of course, you would think that they would beat them convincingly, but no, they did not whatsoever. As Team USA edges out a close victory 101 to 100 thanks to a game-winning layup from LeBron and really great defensive effort on the other side of the floor from AD and Jrue Holiday. But again, this shouldn't happen. It shouldn't come down to a 1-point victory. And what's even crazier is what was actually happening in the middle of the game, because this was very losable for the United States. There is a stretch in the first quarter where USA not only lost their lead, but then going into the second quarter, within the first 4 minutes, South Sudan went on a 17-4 run. Some of the greatest players around the world on the same roster only scored 4 points in a 4-minute span. And what makes it even worse throughout the remainder of the game, USA, they did get a hold back of the lead. They were able to hold it for quite some time, but let it slip again towards the end of the fourth quarter, which is why we got such a close win at the end result. And a lot of the questions that are being presented isn't just in this game. Before we got here a couple of weeks ago, Anthony Edwards was sitting here saying how he should be the #1 option. Joel Embiid is being quoted stating that he has had some concerns with this roster because of aging stars such as LeBron James, and his athleticism and his dominance isn't the same because of his advanced age. Kevin Durant still hasn't played. Kawhi Leonard isn't available anymore and has been replaced by Derek White. But the biggest concern that I actually have for Team USA is the best player on the roster, because be very mindful how we got here. Last year, FIBA with the United States, underwhelming. Didn't even place, let alone get gold. And a lot of people were freaking out on what exactly was going to happen to Team USA. Oh my God, is USA falling off? The dynasty, the dominant figure in basketball around the globe isn't the same, which then sparked some conversation about the concept of the NBA being able to label themselves as world champions, which was infamously brought up by Noah Lyles, or famously, depending on how you view it, which then again sparked several conversations and discussing around USA basketball. And because of this really put a fire under a lot of players' feet to join the Olympics once more, bringing LeBron and Curry and KD out of retirement, while also putting them on the same roster with some up-and-coming stars such as Jason Tatum and Anthony Edwards, culminating in a roster that many people, including myself, thought was going to be the most talented Team USA roster we've seen in quite some time. And the one piece that everyone was concerned with that we were missing was a 5, but Joel Embiid actually stepped up to the plate and filled that void for the roster by joining Team USA, which is not only huge because Embiid, as of today, is the best player on this roster heading into these expedition games, but Embiid being able to fill that void gave us some actual size while also being the best player, which a lot of people thought was going to be the difference maker. But yet here we are, and a player that was supposed to save Team USA, put them over the hump, and really be a difference maker by being the best player potentially on the floor on any given game, somehow is leading us down a path of some of the biggest questions that we have for this team moving forward. Now, I want to be clear. I don't want to make this a Joel Embiid slander video because there are several different other questions and concerns with this team. What Embiid said about LeBron is true. He is older, he's up there in age, and trying to rely on his dominance just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Even though you could argue, statistically speaking, both LeBron and Curry have been some of the best players for the team so far. Outside of AD, I actually do believe they are the next 2 best players that have been performing within these expedition games. And even though, yes, KD is older as well, him not being available early on is certainly hurting us as well. So sure, Embiid is correct. We shouldn't be relying on older players, but here we are, and they have huge impacts on what we do on the offensive side of the floor in particular. So we kind of do need these older guys, and we are missing KD's input to this roster. And also, I don't believe that some of the lineups are doing anyone any favors whatsoever. I understand that Steve Kerr is still trying to figure things out, but I also believe that some of these things should be common sense going up against a South Sudan team that is taller, longer, athletic, gets up and down the floor, plays defense, gives a lot of effort. Matching up with them with a 3-guard lineup in the starting 5 doesn't make any sense whatsoever, especially when the other quote-unquote big that you're playing at the power forward spot is LeBron, who doesn't give the same level of effort and energy that you would get from other players on the opposing roster. And putting a lineup like that around Joel Embiid doesn't really do him any favors in many regards, especially especially defensively. However, there are still a lot of concerns with Joel Embiid that I don't necessarily believe is going to be changed anytime soon, because it is just a part of who he is as a player. And what's even crazier is that you could argue that Anthony Davis should be the one in the starting five, and Embiid, despite being the best player, or supposedly being the best player on the roster, should be coming off of the bench, which is something that I don't necessarily know if Steve Kerr and the rest of the coaching staff is willing to do. Why exactly am I saying this, and why is everybody on social media constantly cooking Embiid? Well, first, offensively, he really slows down what this team does. He's constantly just getting the ball in the elbow, low post, or even at the top, and kind of just holding the ball, trying to initiate, probe, jab, which is something that he does with the Philadelphia 76ers, and it makes a lot of sense for that team and the way that it's structured, because they don't really have any other playmakers, especially this past season, that can manipulate and shift the defense as much as Embiid can. However, here in Olympic basketball, that's not necessarily the case. Zones are used much more frequently because the floor is much more shrinked, thanks to the three-point line being closer to the basket and bigs being able to just wander around the lane for an infinite amount of time. Because of this, Embiid is dealing with defenses that is much more suffocating and seeing a lot of more double teams, which is resulting in him actually leading this team in turnovers. Yes, Embiid is averaging 3 turnovers within like 15 minutes per game that he's played, which is kind of crazy and something that is also very concerning. But even when he does have a possession that is deemed successful, it still feels like he's bogging down the offense because how ball dominant and slower paced he is in contrast to everyone else on the floor. Making quick, decisive decisions is what you're looking for, especially in the starting five that has way more offensive weaponry around him. Now, to be fair to Embiid, these are things that can change. These are things that can be shifted, because I have seen certain sets where Embiid does make quick and much more decisive moves, especially with off-ball screens that are being set with him and Curry, or any action really with him and Curry on or off ball. It's actually pretty beautiful with some of those plays that are being drawn up. But on the other side of the floor is where things get really, really egregious. Defensively, Embiid just doesn't look like he is prepared. Now, part of me wants to say that he doesn't look good at Olympic basketball defense, and there has already been some reports claiming that he doesn't necessarily comprehend the goaltending rules completely. So I'm trying to give him some grace there. And also, there are some parts of me that believes that he's not 100% healthy, which if that's the case, please go sit down somewhere else. I'd much rather Embiid be healthy for the upcoming season rather than him trying to force himself on a team just so he can win gold, despite the fact that we should be able to win it with or without him. But moreover, I consistently see things that he is struggling with defensively that I honestly just believe it's a part of his game. It's just who he is as a player. Expecting Embiid to defend in space or recover, rotate, trying to defend and man an entire lane are things that just are not his strong suit. Using him in drop coverage, having him hover around the rim is a much better way to utilize Embiid. But when he's in a starting five with offensive-oriented players who are older, such as Steph Curry and LeBron, and more than likely Kevin Durant as well, I don't necessarily know if any of those players can really help maximize who he is as a defender and really help him in some of his weak spots. So now you're asking Embiid to do way more than what he is actually able to do. So now what we're seeing is he is getting cooked. He's not rotating cleanly. He's fouling a lot. He actually fouled out in the first game in like 12 minutes. It was pretty bad. But moreover, it just looks really, really awkward watching him trying to do things and overextend himself in areas in which we all know that's not his strong suit, which is a huge reason why I believe that he should be coming off the bench and Anthony Davis is the one that should be starting. And this is not me as a Laker fan trying to push propaganda, but just looking at their numbers side by side, it is very clear, undeniably, that AD is much more suited for Olympic basketball. He has been a much better and much more fluid defensive player, while also a much better play finisher that could be really maximized alongside the best passers and playmakers for this team, which in my opinion would really maximize who AD is. There are times when he's coming off the bench playing alongside Bam Adebayo and other non-offensive oriented players in contrast to what's in the starting lineup. Those things I don't necessarily believe would happen as much if he is play finishing around Curry and LeBron. And then defensively, unlike Embiid, AD has been a menace. He has been able to cover so much ground, correct so many mistakes, and really looks like the much more fluid defender. But more importantly and more specifically, his flexibility and his versatility is something that should be utilized to really mask a lot of the mistakes that are going to be continuously made, which is why he's going to be even more important and pivotal for him to be in that lineup in contrast to Embiid, because trying to ask Embiid to defend in space or come out on the perimeter and switch, those are things that just are not tailored to who he he is as a player. While on the flip side, if Embiid comes off of the bench, he's going to be playing alongside Bam Adebayo. So he's going to have somebody who's going to be able to roam and help out a little bit more while he stays closer to the basket and attached closer to the rim defensively. He's more than likely also going to be on the floor with Derek White and Jason Tatum, two defensive-oriented perimeter players, which will again allow him not to have to overextend himself on the perimeter as well. You can really just rely on Embiid to do what he does best, and that is rim protect. But I think a much bigger aspect to Embiid's game coming off the bench would actually be his offensive game, because there are moments where it does look a little wonky, it looks a little awkward with Anthony Davis, with a bunch of other non-playmakers, or at least prominent ones. I do believe Embiid, however, with the backups, with the reserves, as the offensive firepower that he has, he will have the ability to have a much more prominent role as a option coming off the bench scoring-wise that can really aid that team from having those awkward, stagnant moments where they're not scoring as much coming off of the bench. And that's something that Embiid can provide, I believe, much more than Anthony Davis can. Now, with all that being said, because I'm pretty sure you thought that I was about to slander the hell out of Embiid, but no, I'm gonna be fair to him. It's Expedition Games. It's gonna take him some time, and I do believe there's an out. But this is where I actually am concerned, because that's a fix. It's a very realistic fix. And it's one that I don't really think no one really is gonna care about if they do it. Sure, some nasty people on the timeline are gonna get their agendas off, but who really cares if Embiid comes off the bench? I don't think it really matters. However, I don't believe that we're going to make that adjustment, because Steve Kerr has already came out and said, despite the fact that these are Expedition Games where he's trying different lineups, trying different sets, trying new things, he is committed to the idea of keeping Embiid in the starting five alongside Steph Curry and LeBron, which to me is crazy. There is absolutely, positively, you can watch AD perform, look how well he looks, even with the second unit, how fluid he is defensively, knowing that those are things that Embiid is struggling with non-defensive oriented players in the starting five, and you do not, at bare minimum, at least try a different starting five that would consist AD out there instead of Embiid. I think that is negligence. I think that is idiotic. At least not trying it, to me, is crazy. And I do believe that is something that needs to be talked about and needs to be discussed, because there are a lot of questionable things that I'm starting to see with Team USA. It was already questionable, in my opinion, that they replaced Kawhi Leonard with Derek White. I understand the value of three-point shooting. However, having someone out there replacing a front court player for a guard gives up a lot of length, even though Derek White does provide defense. I'm not saying that, but the length that it is providing is something that is so hard to find and replace from a guard perspective. And we saw that with South Sudan. They were out there crashing the glass, grabbing rebounds, out hustling us. Those are things that I don't think that we would struggle with if Jaylen Brown was out there. Also, the addition of Tyrese Halliburton on this roster over Kyrie Irving, very questionable, especially because Tyrese has looked really, really bad in Olympic basketball so far, which makes sense. The game is much more physical, but more importantly, there's so much talent on this roster. If you cannot make quick, decisive moves like Kyrie can, you're not going to be as impactful offensively. But moreover, the concern that I think me and many people are going to continue to have is how much this team still relies on their older players. Bro, LeBron and Curry, outside of AD, genuinely look like the second and third best players on this roster. Some of these players are struggling with Olympic basketball. They're not the same type of shooters that we would normally see. Definitely not the same shot creators. And a lot of that will be corrected when Kevin Durant comes back. Why are we relying on KD? Like, he's old. Same with LeBron, Curry. They're older players. It's concerning as hell at this stage of their careers. Team USA is still relying on them this heavily. And I think this is part of the bigger picture that everyone is concerned with, and that is the rest of the world catching up with Team USA. Let me be clear. I still think that this team is going to win. They're supposed to win. This is the most talented roster in the entire tournament. Like, there's just absolutely no way that they should not be able to win. Point blank, period. However, it is also still undeniable that the rest of the world is catching up. Like, I do not expect this version of Team USA to be as dominant as some of their predecessors. Even though, yes, we are winning these games, the margin of victory is Team USA averaging 97.5 points, while the opposing team is averaging 85.8 points. That is a much closer margin of victory than we are accustomed to. And I think, again, a lot of that has to do with the fact that these teams are much more talented than what they used to be. And the fact that we are having to rely on these older players to still produce at a certain level, while the best player that we should have doesn't seem like his game is best suited for Olympic basketball, may have to come off the bench. Those are all things that may not be big concerns today, but certainly will continue to be concerns later on in future iterations. Let's just say we got to enjoy it. But with that being said, I still believe that Team USA is going to win gold, and I don't believe they're going to be in too much trouble. Just don't expect this team to blow teams out by record margins like we used to back in the day. But hey, those are just my thoughts. If you missed the last video, make sure you go check it out. It's on the screen somewhere around here. But if not, as always, hit the subscribe button and notification bell. Leave a comment down below. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.